The security measures you've seen for tonight's event probably tipped you off that you're here for something special. Our featured speaker tonight, Mr. Geert Wilders, gets a lot of attention when he delivers his message. I think it's safe to say that not all of the attention is positive. He's been a member of the Dutch Parliament since 1998, a span of 17 years. In 2004, he left his political party over differences in policy and formed a new party called the Party for Freedom. For years, he has campaigned actively to stop the Islamization of the Netherlands, a phenomenon that is occurring across Europe with alarming speed. In late 2004, Mr. Wilders was the target of an assassination attempt orchestrated by an Islamist group believed to be behind the murder of Theo van Gogh earlier that same month. Since then, he's received numerous threats on his life and has had to live under constant armed guard. In 2008, Mr. Wilders attracted international attention when he wrote and commissioned Fitna, a 16-minute documentary that explores the Quranic origins of terrorism and Islamic supremacy. In 2009, Mr. Wilders' opponents found a new way to harass him, this time using Dutch anti-hate speech laws to prosecute him for saying things that were true but made them feel uncomfortable. After a 2-year judicial ordeal, Mr. Wilders was acquitted on all charges. In 2012, Mr. Wilders wrote a nonfiction book, Marked for Death, which we have for sale here, in which he offers a full account of his long battle against Islamic zealots. This past May, Mr. Wilders was the keynote speaker at a free speech celebration in Garland, Texas. 2 heavily armed Islamists traveled to that event with the intent of killing Mr. Wilders and other attendees. The security forces on site that day thwarted this terrorist attack. Note, not workplace violence, terrorist attack. And the only casualties were the Islamists themselves. I have often praised the courage of our past speakers, and deservedly so. But the courage exhibited by Mr. Wilders is of a different sort. He has been targeted for assassination by adherents of a brutal ideology with millions of followers around the world. He has, quite literally, put his life on the line in service to his work. I can only begin to imagine the personal sacrifices required to deal with the threats that he faces. And yet, he persists in his ardent defense of Western values. Before I yield the lectern to Mr. Wilders, I want to acknowledge a special guest that we have here tonight. Mr. Wilders' wife, Christina, has accompanied him from the Netherlands. Christina, please accept our sincere gratitude for the sacrifices that you have made in allowing Geert to fight for the principles we all hold so dear and to travel here tonight. Mr. Wilders is an internationally known leader in the battle for freedom of speech, the rule of law, and Western civilization. He joins a roster of outstanding speakers who have visited us in the past 2 years to sound the alarm about Islam, including Noni Darwish, Pamela Geller, and Robert Spencer. I am absolutely delighted that Mr. Wilders has chosen the Conservative Forum of Silicon Valley for his first visit to the United States since the event in Garland, Texas. Please help me give a warm welcome to Mr. Geert Wilders.
Thank you for your very kind words. My pleasure. I'm glad to have you. Thank you. My dear friends, thank you so much for inviting me back to America, inviting me to California and giving me the opportunity to talk to you. Thank you to the Conservative Forum. Thank you all for having me here tonight. Thank you, Dutch and American police, to make this evening possible. It's great to be back in America, the land of the free and the home of the brave. It is great to be back in California, the state where dreams come true, and no challenge is ever too big to overcome. My friends, we are living in hard and difficult times. We are facing challenges we have never seen before. And I'm here to talk to you about Islam and the huge existential threat it constitutes for our society and our freedom. And I'm not talking about radical Islam. Don't let anyone fool you that such a crazy concept exists. There might be moderate people, but there is only one Islam, and that is the Islam of the Quran. But before I elaborate about Islam and the threat we face worldwide, let me first say what a pleasure it is to be here in Silicon Valley, the technological heartland of the world. It is not hard not to feel optimistic when driving through this vibrant valley of innovation. Here lies the epicenter of change. Here lives the future. Here we find the proof that for every problem, however hard and difficult, there is always a solution. As the great Californian and disabled sportsman Roger Crawford says, and I quote, "Being challenged in life is inevitable. Being defeated is optional." End of quote. And all that is needed is the will to solve the problem, the passion, the perseverance to overcome difficulties, and the confidence that free societies are always able to bring out the best in people. And this confidence is the cause of my optimism. Forces of darkness have attacked us in the past, but we have always prevailed, and we will do so again. Let me tell you something about myself. I am a politician from Europe. I'm not a cabinet member. I am a simple member of the House of Representatives in the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And I oppose Islamization. I do it in a peaceful way. I do it through democratic means. I engage in political debate. But Islam has marked me for death. I am on the death lists of Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, and the Pakistani Taliban. And indeed, for the last 11 years, I have been living under around-the-clock police protection. Wherever I go, armed policemen go with me. I live in heavily guarded government safe house. I'm driven around in armored cars. My wife and I have even lived in prison cells, in army barracks, just to be safe from Islamic terrorists. And allow me as well, because it's not often that she accompanies me, to pay my respect in front of you to my wife. Without her support, it would not have been possible. Thank you, Christina. As I said, it's not about me. Everybody who warns about the dangers of Islam get death threats. My good friend, the Danish journalist Lars Hedegaard, was attacked. And so were the cartoonist Kurt Westergaard and Las Vilks. Earlier this year, as you know, 10 journalists and cartoonists of the French magazine Charlie Hebdo were murdered, slaughtered. A few years ago, my compatriot, the filmmaker Theo van Gogh, was assassinated in broad daylight in the streets of Amsterdam by Islamic thugs. And the list goes on and on. As a matter of fact, we are all under threat today. But let's not make one mistake. Promise me never to be silent. Never to be silenced. We have to tell the truth about Islam, whatever the consequences. It's our duty to do so. And I know what I'm talking about. Not only did I study Islam, but I have traveled the Islamic world extensively when I was still able to do so more than 11 years ago. I have visited Turkey, Egypt, Tunisia, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Indonesia, and indeed I have met many kind, friendly and hospitable people there. And of course there are many moderate and kind Muslims. But this does not blind us and should not blind us for the very important reality that while Muslims might be moderates, Islam certainly is not. Islam is evil and nothing else. Allow me to give you a short briefing on Islam. The most important thing to know is the importance of the Quran. According to the Islam, the Quran is written by Allah himself. An angel dictated it literally to Muhammad, the Prophet. And it's important because every word in the Quran is Allah's word and therefore not open for discussion or interpretation. It is valid for every situation and at all times. And that, my dear friends, that is why there is no moderate Islam and never will be a moderate Islam. And if you get all the violent surahs, all the violent parts out of the Quran, you would have a leaflet, a book as thick as the latest Donald Duck. My friends, Islam is totalitarian. It wants to submit us all. And according to Islam, there is no room for anything but Islam. Islam is not voluntary either. No Muslim is allowed to renounce it. Apostates must be killed. It commands the submission of every nation on earth to Islamic Sharia law. And that's why I believe that Islam is not so much a religion. It should not be compared to other religions. It should be compared to other totalitarian ideologies. You was not allowed to leave communism either. People were not allowed to leave fascism either. People are not allowed to leave Islam either. So let's forget about the concept that Islam is a religion like Christianity or Judaism. It is not. It is a totalitarian ideology like communism and fascism, and we should treat it as such. At least your politicians should. We are all the victims of Islamization. Look around you. This building is surrounded by law enforcement officers, heavily armed. This gathering here tonight, everybody has seen it, is heavily protected. And you can ask yourself why. We are no criminals. We are peaceful, ordinary citizens, exercising a fundamental right in our free society, the right of free speech. And this is something that the American founding fathers fought for and enshrined in the First Amendment of your constitution. So the situation here tonight, in fact, is absolutely un-American. But unfortunately, it has become a reality in America and the rest of the Western world. And why? Why is that happening? I will tell you why. Because Islam has entered America, and because Islam will take over America and Europe if we do not act today. Islam is fundamentally changing our society. Fanatics, brainwashed by a totalitarian ideology, are ready to kill us, simply because we try to inform people about the nature of Islam. They terrorize people into submission. And I am grateful that your brave organization did not give in to these threats. But the fact remains. Our own Judeo-Christian identity, our traditions, our freedoms, our values, including free speech, are no longer a given. They are in danger. They have to be protected. And that is a sad thing, unworthy of a free society. Only last month, we saw another tragic example of Islamization in America. A gunman in Chattanooga, Tennessee, murdered 4 American Marines and a Navy officer. The assassin, Mohammed Yusuf Abdulaziz, was an immigrant from Kuwait. And this makes one think about events in France in March 2012, where Mohamed Merah, an immigrant from Algerian descent, killed 3 French paratroopers. The same assassin that later attacked a Jewish school, murdering 3 children and a rabbi. Let me tell you about my own continent and my own country. During the past decades, the European governments have made a terrible mistake. Please, America, don't repeat this mistake. In Europe, we have foolishly allowed millions of immigrants from Islamic countries to settle within our borders. And now we are witnessing a new reality. Islamic neighborhoods are expanding. Many European cities have rapidly expanding Islamic populations. Just take Amsterdam, Brussels, Bradford, Marseille, Malmö, and so many other cities and towns in Europe. Europe is becoming a continent of headscarves and mosques. In the Netherlands, Mohammed is currently already the 2nd most popular name among newborn boys. Nationwide, and even the most popular name, Mohammed, the most popular name for newborn boys in our 3 largest cities, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and The Hague. This is also the case in the Belgian capital Brussels, the Norwegian capital Oslo, the British capital London. As a matter of fact, in the whole of Great Britain, Mohammed today has become the most popular name by newborn boys. Europe is a continent of extremism, becoming a continent of extremism and intolerance. And once again, please, America, don't make the mistake that thinking that what is happening in Europe today will not happen in America tomorrow. Because it will. It is already happening in America today. Last summer, to give you another example, in my hometown, The Hague, sympathizers of the Islamic State paraded openly in the streets. They carried openly swastikas. They carried the black flags of the Islamic State. They shouted, "Death to the Jews," in broad daylight in my hometown. And in Britain, Islamic gangs have been filmed patrolling London streets, demanding that passers-by conform to Sharia law. Recently, a young girl was beaten up in the French city of Reims by so-called Islamic religious police because she was sunbathing in a park in her bikini in a French town. And in every Western nation, there are today homegrown jihadis prepared to commit violence. The Islamic State call them city wolves. City wolves. There are thousands of them in Europe today. According to the European police agency Europol, 5,000 homegrown jihadis have left Europe to fight in Syria and Iraq, and many of them return and make the streets of Europe unsafe today. Last January, an ISIS operative said that this organization has already sent 4,000 fighters to Europe. And the British authorities recently have uncovered an ISIS plot to kill Queen Elizabeth. ISIS has announced that by 2020 it aims to conquer large parts of Europe, including Spain, the entire Balkan, as well as the northern half of Africa and the Indian Peninsula. And our political leaders, your own President Barack Obama, Britain's Prime Minister David Cameron, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, my own Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, they all still say today that Islam is a religion of peace. And let me tell you, are they wrong or are they right? They are totally wrong. John Quincy Adams, America's 6th president, said, and I quote, "The precept of the Quran is perpetual war against all who deny that Muhammad is the prophet of God." And Winston Churchill, the great British wartime prime minister, called Islam a retrograde force and called Adolf Hitler's anti-Semitic book Mein Kampf the new Quran. Adams was right. Churchill was right. Obama and Cameron were wrong. My friends, we live in an age where people like the idea of rights, so long as they do not have to pay the price for it. The political and media elites are all in favor of speaking the truth, so long as the truth is a cliché. But when duty and honor commands them to stand athwart history and tell stop to Islam, they flee away and lose their patience with those who do their duty. They call us extremists. They drag us to court. They try to silence us, but they will never succeed. They will only make us stronger and more determined. So let us stop appeasing and stop electing appeasers. Stop electing appeasers. The jihadis and their sympathizers, they do not belong in our societies. So I say, let us reclaim our freedom. Fortunately, I'm not alone. All over the Western world, and this is the good news, more and more people are saying enough is enough. And we are not marginal figures. I myself, I'm an elected politician, leader of the Party for Freedom, currently in the most recent Dutch national TV poll, the largest party in the Netherlands today. And the jihadis wants to silence us because a growing number of people are realizing that we are telling the truth. My friends, we must never give in. We should not allow the terrorists to win and evil. Once again, Islam is evil to triumph. Where are the Western government leaders with the wisdom of Adams and Churchill. On the eve of the Battle of Long Island, I understand the first major battle of the American War of Independence, George Washington told his men, and I quote, "The time is now at hand which must determine whether Americans are to be free men or slaves. Our cruel and unrelenting enemy leaves us only the choice of brave resistance or the most abject submission." End of quote. These words by George Washington, these wise words apply to all of us as well today. Where are the Western government leaders with the courage of George Washington? Once again, we have it in our own hands. Vote different, vote stronger, vote better leaders into office. A few years ago, I called on Muslims to liberate themselves from the yoke of Islam and choose for freedom. I wholeheartedly support Muslims who love freedom. So I told them, free yourselves, leave Islam. And I still stand by this appeal. But this does not blind me to the equally important reality that while many Muslims are moderates, a very large number, unfortunately, and it has to be said as well, are not moderate at all. And let me give you some shocking numbers. Some shocking numbers from Europe. The University of Amsterdam did a recent study about the 1 million Muslims in my own country, the Netherlands. It found that 11% of the Muslims in Holland is prepared to use violence for the sake of Islam. And that is a staggering 110,000 people in a small country that is only half the size of Maine. And it gets even worse. While the terrorists indeed are only a minority, polls show that they have the support of the majority. And you don't read about that in the national press. They try to fool you by saying that it's only a small minority and the others, the majority, is against the Islamic terrorism. Well, it's not true. Let me give you some numbers. 73%. 73% of the Islamic population in the Netherlands say that Muslims who go to Syria to fight the jihad are heroes. 73%. And 80% of the Turkish youth in the Netherlands believe that it's not bad to have violence against non-believers. It's not a wrong thing. 80%. So we're talking about 73% of the Muslims in Holland who believe that jihadists are heroes, and 80% of the Turkish youth, one of the biggest minority groups in the Netherlands, believe that violence against non-Muslims is not a bad thing. And last June, some numbers about America. Last June, a survey among US Muslims revealed that a majority of 51% of the US Muslims want to be able to live under Sharia law in America. And even more disturbing is the fact that 29% of the American Muslims are okay with violence against people who so-called insult the Prophet Muhammad. And 25%, a staggering 1 in 4, agree that violence against Americans here in the United States is justified as a part of jihad. Indeed, my friends, you have a serious problem. We have a serious problem. We all in the West face a serious problem. And the problem, let's forget about political being correct, the problem is called Islam. I cannot make it more clear. Islam is the name of the problem. And the problem is growing. And we cannot afford to ignore it any longer, because our existence is at stake. It's not an economical problem, where you have good times and bad times, and where you can reverse a bad economical situation if you lower the taxes and do some other things. This is an existential problem. If we don't deal with it, we lose our freedom, and our countries do not exist anymore as we know them. So we have to take it very, very seriously. Here in the United States, you have a problem with illegal immigration from Mexico. But just imagine if Mexico were an Islamic country today, where millions of Islamic immigrants are crossing illegally your borders. That, in your imagination, is exactly what is happening in Europe right now. There are already millions of Islamic immigrants in Europe. Last year, only almost 700,000 people, mostly from Islamic countries, made their way through Europe. And this year, the numbers are expected to be even higher. Every day, you've probably seen it on TV, they try to cross the Mediterranean with boats. In Calais, they storm trucks and trains in an effort to enter Britain. All over Europe, we are facing a major catastrophe. Every day, the situation gets worse, while our governing elites put their heads in the sand. It is time, my friends, to wake up, because time is running out. And indeed, as was said in the introduction, this is my first speech in America since the events in Garland, Texas last May, where two jihadis try to cause a bloodbath during a Mohammed cartoon contest in Garland. And I gave the keynote speech, and I was and I still am very proud and support the organizers of the contest, my good and brave American friends Pamela Geller and Robert Spencer. The winner of this Garland cartoon contest was, as you might know, Bosch Forsten. And Bosch Forsten is a former Muslim, an apostate. And Bosch had made a picture of a fierce-looking Muhammad waving a sword. "You cannot draw me," Muhammad said. And underneath the picture, Bosch had written, "That is exactly why I am drawing you." And that says it all. Indeed. Bosch stood for his rights as an American citizen. Under Islamic Sharia law, depicting Muhammad is a crime with a death penalty. But as an American, Bosch Forsten is not living in an Islamic country. This is America, the land of the free. This is the United States. Here, everyone is allowed to make pictures and drawings, no matter what the Sharia says. And everyone is allowed to change their religion, as Bosch Forsten did, and become an Islamic apostate. My message here today, once again, is that we have to make choices. Be brave and make a choice. Resistance or submission. Freedom or slavery. Liberty or Islam. Of course, everybody will say, we choose resistance, freedom, and liberty. And indeed, there is no other option. There is no other way. That is why we have to support initiatives like Garland. We should never allow ourselves to be intimidated by Islamic thugs. Never, ever. Not in Europe and not in America. And the good news is that more and more people are on our side. Just last week, a poll in Britain revealed how people think about Islam in general in the United Kingdom today. And over half of the population, or 56%, say that Islam, and I repeat, the question was Islam, not Islamic fundamentalism, but Islam. 56% of the UK citizens answered that they see Islam as a threat to Western society. And the political elites know it. They know that the mood of the people, that the vox populi is changing rapidly. And that is why they are panicking today. And that is why they try to stop us. They cannot stop the people anymore for voting for us. So they try to stop us through the courts. Unlike America, unfortunately, we do not have a First Amendment in Europe. And in the past decades, so-called hate speech laws have been introduced. And they are totally subjective. It is sufficient that someone feels insulted to get you to court, to bring you to court. And you might understand that those millions of Islamic activists feel very easily insulted. 7 years ago, indeed, I made a documentary about Islam and the Islamization of my country. Even then, they panicked. Jordan reacted, the Kingdom of Jordan, with the threat to issue an international arrest warrant against me. Indonesia, still valid today, declared me persona non grata for the rest of my life. Even the Secretary General of the United Nations denounced me. And in my own country, the Netherlands, I was taken to court, fortunately acquitted, but now the Dutch authorities have charged me again. And the only reason is that I voice an opinion that they do not like, that they find intolerant. Instead of acting against those who are intolerant to us, they go after those politicians who are fed up being tolerant to the people who are intolerant to us. Let's start becoming intolerant to the people who are intolerant to us. Last March, I spoke in Vienna, Austria, where I spoke again, as today, about the threat of the Islamization in Europe and how we should deal with it. And once again, an Islamic organization said they felt insulted. And it cannot get more crazier. Now, the public prosecutor in Austria has even begun a criminal investigation against me. It's called legal jihad. If you cannot win on a democratic way, try it in a legal way. But let me tell you one thing. I will never give up. Always speak the truth about Islam, because too much is at stake. It is sad, though. What we are witnessing today is how freedom dies. It dies because politicians are unwilling to defend it. It dies because of cowardice, because of ignorance, because of political opportunism and false political correctness. And that is not the way it should be done. We owe it to the past generations always to speak the truth. People died for that, and not to take our liberties for granted. We owe it to the future generations not to sign away their freedom. And we can hold, my friends, we can hold the global expansion of Islam if we do our duty. We can't turn the tide, but we have to act today. Today, my dear friends, must be our finest hour. We must confront cowardice with the truth. We must confront ignorance with the truth. We must confront political correctness and political opportunism with the truth. The truth about Islam. I am from Europe. You are Americans. But we are all in the same boat. So I believe we must unite against this common threat. The Islamic tide is strong, but the West has repulsed it before. And we can do so again if we wake up and if we stand together. We should stand with every nation and every people threatened by Islamic Jihad. But especially, if you allow me, we should stand with the country that I love so much, namely the State of Israel. Let's be honest. Israel is a beacon of light in a sea of Islamic darkness. I have lived in Israel for a few years. It felt like home. It is our home. It is the only democracy in the Middle East. And it's the only country in the region that shares our values. Let's never forget it. And its conflict with Islam, it's not about land. You will not solve it by changing land. It's about ideology. It's a conflict about ideology. It's a conflict between freedom and tyranny. Israel is the canary in the coal mine. If Islam conquers Israel, we will be next. And Huntington was wrong. There is no clash of civilizations. There is a clash between our civilization and barbarism. That is the reality. And that is why we are all Israel. And that is why we should all support and defend the safety of Israel. And we should never trust Islamic criminal regimes such as the Islamic State of Iran. The nuclear treaty, which your president and the other Western leaders recently concluded with the Islamic State of Iran, is a travesty and an appalling historical mistake. It is a major threat to the security of Israel and the entire West. It is time to end these appeasement policies. It is time to support Israel. But once again, the change can only be achieved if you choose better leaders. My friends, it is not easy to criticize Islam. The jihadis will put you on a death list. The authorities will drag you to court. The political establishment will refuse to listen to your warnings. And they all will try to silence us. But the people are on our side, because we are on their side. And that is the side of liberty. And if I were to become the next Dutch Prime Minister, here is a few things that I would do. First, my first day in office, a Dutch, or even better, a European First Amendment, a guarantee for free speech. Protection for speaking the truth, no matter how politically incorrect it might be. And the second thing I would do, which is not politically correct either, is that I would, from the same day, end all immigration from Islamic countries. Enough is enough. We need less instead of more Islam. And why? Why are we so crazy to allow them to build mosques in our countries, while the first church still has to be built in Saudi Arabia and other countries? So I would say no more mosques in our societies, whether you like it or not. No more mosques, no more Islamic schools. Enough is enough. And the third thing I would do is, of course, as we have today, I would guarantee equal rights to anyone, whatever background one has, who assimilates in our societies, who respects our laws, our constitution, and our values. But if you cross the red line, if you try to act according to Sharia law, if you think about acting and are acting about jihad, wherever you're from, whatever your name is, I will take your Dutch passport and expel you over the border. And the fourth thing I would do is regain national sovereignty and reinstate national border controls. You might not know it, but in Europe we are so stupid that the Netherlands, my own country, became a member of the European Union, became a member of the Schengen Treaty, and we don't only have to pay billions of taxpayers' money to Greece, as you might know, but also we are no longer a sovereign country. We have no national border controls anymore. And all those hundreds of thousands, all those millions of people who are coming from Africa today to Europe, we cannot send them back. So what I would do is make an example from Switzerland. I would like the Dutch to be as the Swiss, be in the heart of the European continent, but not a member of the European Union. The biggest disease Europe faces today is that we don't know what we are anymore. And if you are unable to know what you are, you don't know what you are not either. And I believe that it's not racist. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of. If we would say that our own culture, that is based on Christianity, that is based on Judaism, is a far better culture than the Islamic culture. Don't you agree? Stop the cultural relativism, the biggest disease of Europe today. Let's be proud on who we are. We are not Islamic. We are Christians. We are Jews. We are humanistic background, but we are certainly not Islamic, and let's say so to everybody who wants to hear it. My friends, a choice has to be made. I hope you understand that this is my main message tonight. And the choice, I cannot repeat it enough, at the end of the day is a simple one. Will you choose Islam or will you choose freedom? And please make the right choice. Let us continue the legacy our ancestors bestowed on us, with liberty and justice for all. Let us never surrender. Let us choose freedom. And let me finish my speech by quoting one of your great presidents, Thomas Jefferson. I also quote him in my book, Marked for Death. His words, still today, every day, are a great inspiration to me. Thomas Jefferson, President Jefferson, said, "In matters of principle, stand like a rock." And that, my friends, is exactly what we should do and what I will do, and I hope you all will do. We will stand like a stone wall in the defense of our freedom. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Tell us how your message is received in your home country, in the Netherlands.
Well, luckily, as I said, and that is the good news, that Europe is changing. And it's not, unfortunately, yet the political elite or the governments that are changing. I mean, I quoted not only your own President Barack Obama, but also most of the European leaders, my own Prime Minister, the Chancellor of Germany, the French President, the UK Prime Minister. I mean, they have not changed their tune yet, but the people are changing their mind. The common people in Europe are living today, every day again, under the consequences of this Islamic immigration. This lack of assimilation. This lack of politicians asking people to abide by our laws, our constitution and our values. To look in the other direction if people commit the most horrible crimes. So the good news is that not only in my own country, but that in most European countries, parties like mine have not a majority yet, but have and face increasing popularity. And that is a good thing.
Can you comment on the work that's been done by Ayaan Hirsi Ali, Bridget Gabriel, and Noni Darwish?
Yes, well, I respect all three of them a lot. I know them very well, and I'm very proud to know them and to have such friends, American friends, that are so brave. And I try to work together with them. Ayaan Hirsi Ali was not only a dear friend, but also a colleague of mine. As a member of parliament at that time, my former party, we were MPs in the same political group in the Dutch parliament. And we did a lot of things together, and we got in a lot of trouble together, especially trouble, to be honest. But we had a very strong views on the Islamization. Certainly, her being an apostate and everything she experienced. Unfortunately, I have to be honest that I don't agree too much with her last book, where she says that she believes in a more moderate Islam. I told you in my introduction that there is only one Islam, and that is an Islam that is unfortunately not a book according to the Quran, according to the life of Muhammad. It's not a very moderate concept and not a very moderate ideology, because it's the word of Muhammad. Because the Quran is the word of Muhammad. And if you study, as I did, the life of Muhammad, certainly his Medina time, you will see that he did the most terrible things that still are an example to so many Muslims today. So I don't believe there is a moderate Islam, and I have to disagree with Ayaan Hirsi Ali there. But even if she was right, would be right and I was wrong, we cannot afford to wait 500 years until it will happen, because we face the problems today, existential problems that should be solved. We should not engage, with all respect to my three friends you mentioned, we should not engage in an intellectual discussion today. We should fight back against the Islamization that our countries face today.
Islamists are 20 years into using our constitution to destroy it. How can we appeal to politicians and judges who are smart enough to be afraid for their families, if not for themselves?
Well, you know, you have a big advantage compared to Europe, compared to most European countries, maybe except for Switzerland, and compared to my own country. You have the election. You elect almost everybody. You elect the mayors, you elect the sheriffs, you elect almost any person in office. We don't. Even in Holland, even the mayor is appointed by the government. The people have no choice whatsoever. So what I believe is that, and that is the most important thing, besides the grassroots organizations of the three people, like Brigitte Gabriel, who's doing fantastic work, like unlike those organizations, or besides those organizations, I should say, there is only one solution to change a policy, and that is to elect different members of Congress, to elect, I should not be careful being not an American, but let's say it in general, elect other prime ministers, other presidents. We all know who I'm talking about, right? So that's the only way to deal with it. Let them know that if they keep being politically correct, if they ignore the problem about Islam, if they refuse to answer your emails or your requests about what is happening on an Islamic school or in your neighborhood, or the fear you have about the safety of your children, your girls or whatsoever, if they didn't do that, don't elect them anymore. There is only one strong message: send people out of office who are not serious about the problem.
Surely Islamization is not happening uniformly across Europe. Where is it happening more quickly versus less quickly? Is there anywhere where it's being rolled back? And if so, what are they doing right?
Well, unfortunately, it's worse all over the European Union. Maybe not the current government, but the former government of Denmark, who was not part of Schengen and was able to have their own immigration laws and their own border controls, was not the worst off. But yeah, at the end of the day, we all are. And as I said, if you allow me to elaborate a little bit on this question, a little bit longer than in the other questions, Europe is facing today, my dear friends, a catastrophe when it comes to the asylum seekers from Africa. You might have seen it on the TV or read it in the newspapers. Thousands, 100,000, millions of people are coming. They are not, most of them, 80–90%, are not real refugees. Are people who are making selfies when they arrive on the beach in Greece. Are people who are not fleeing for war. Are people who are economically driven. And unfortunately, they are allowed to enter our society. And I believe, and I advocated in my own Dutch parliament, that we should adopt the Australian approach. I don't know if you're familiar with the Australian approach. Australia has the so-called pushback policy, which means that any boat, without any exemption, who is trying to arrive in Australia will be pushed back from their navy. And if the boat is unsafe, if people are afraid that they would drown, they are even provided by new safe boats with water and food. But they are sent back from Australia. This is the only way. And because of that, in the last 1.5 years, not one refugee reached Australia by sea. Not one. Which means that not one person drowned, as happened in the Mediterranean in Europe, and that is crazy. And criminal human traffickers have no business either in that region. So what do we Europeans do? We have the navy of many European countries patrolling across the borders, across the sea borders of Northern Africa. But they are used not as a pushback mechanism, but as a taxi area. They are getting the refugees, take them to Greece or to Italy, and of course, if people know that they have a chance to be taxied to Europe, there will be even more. And unfortunately, more people drown. And it's good business for the human traffickers, because they will provide them with even worse boats, because they know that after 10 miles, the Navy will pick them up and help them trafficking to the rest of Europe. So it's not a good thing. And of course, there are real refugees. Maybe 10% of those million of people who are coming to Europe today are real refugees. And even there, I say, of course, those people should be provided safe havens. We don't want people to be killed in Syria or Iraq. But why not give them safe haven in Arab countries? I made a point at our Dutch Prime Minister in a debate very recently. You know, the country of Kuwait has 27 refugees. We have 1 million, they took 27. Saudi Arabia took none. The other Gulf states, they do nothing. They are very rich. So what I would say, we adopt the Australian policy and push the boats back, and the real refugees, let Saudi Arabia and the other countries take care of them. They have the money, they have the thing to do.
As a member of parliament, are there any efforts going on to stop providing free social services for Islamic immigrants to the Netherlands?
Well, that's a very good question, because one of the other reasons, besides this taxi thing that we do in Europe, is that of course we have, unlike America, a big fat welfare state. And which means that if you arrive in Holland, for instance, you will get a free housing. You will get free medical help. You will get what we call pocket money in Holland. You will earn even more without doing anything than your neighbor who is working for the minimum wage. So people are attracted by an enormous welfare state, which is not for the people who earned it. Let's be clear about that. I mean, there are Dutchmen who have worked for it for years, who deserved it, who paid for it, who, if they need it, I mean, we made the social security for them. So I asked once our parliament to change the law, our government, and I made a motion in parliament which unfortunately was rejected. And I said that, well, you need at least to be 10 years in our country, 10 years without any crime, 10 years where you learn the language, 10 years with a job, and maybe then you are allowed to have social security. But it was rejected, unfortunately.
So one questioner is asking about the relationship of the Muslim Brotherhood with Barack Obama. Do you have any comments on that? Either the relationship or the effect that they have on him?
No, I think it's a wise thing not to comment on that. I have diplomatic immunity though, but I want to keep it. I'm joking, but no, it's not. I know. No, I know. I'm joking.
We comment all the time.
Okay.
All right. Can you share with us the name of a person or a handful of people who have been extremely influential in your life?
Yes, well, I'm very much influenced by the leaders I mentioned. The United Kingdom, Winston Churchill was a great example. I mentioned a few presidents of America, American presidents in my speech, but the one I admire the most is Ronald Reagan. He was a real example for me. Ronald Reagan was and is still one of my big heroes, American heroes, worldwide heroes, but also Israeli politicians that influenced me a lot. While I'm answering your questions, unfortunately, there are no Dutch politicians. But okay, things might change.
Can you give us some examples of what an Islamic US could be like in daily life?
Well, you know, Islam means Sharia law. And Sharia law, even today, not when it comes to criminal law, but how people marry and things like that, we already see today in the United Kingdom that there are Sharia courts active. Often illegal, but still, they are active today. Which means, as you know, because this is Sharia law, that the woman is worth half of a man. That you will have genital mutilation of young girls. That you have, I can give you 500 examples, that you get Israel hate, that you get halal food, that you get all those things that do not belong to a society that is based on Christianity and Judaism. That is what we will face. You will face a lot of violence. I give you examples. I could have given you 20, 30 more examples about aggression. Aggression from, of course, not all the Muslims, but from Muslims who believe that there should not be anything else than Sharia law and Muslim law in our societies. And if you dress up, because it's a nice sunny weather, as a girl in a bikini or anything else, or if you drink, what happened in our country as well, if you drink water during Ramadan, you will be beaten up. You will have the worst time ever. But the most important thing, most important answer is that at the end of the day, our identity is gone and we will not be free people anymore. And that is why we should fight it.
Are there any political figures that you're aware of in America right now who have a good understanding of Islamization?
Well, there are a few, yes. There are a few, not too many, but there are some in your both national as in some states. I remember that a few years ago, and this is something that really helps. I don't know how many of you people were in America, but I took the initiative once with some friends to take some state politicians to Europe. I remember that we invited some people from the parliament from Tennessee, the state senate, I should call it, and we took them to Europe. And we showed them the streets of Brussels, Antwerp, Amsterdam. And I mean, they were tough guys. They were guys who came from the American Army and Navy, and they were afraid on the streets. They were harassed. They were shouted at, and the groups came to them because they went into a wrong neighborhood, and it's all Islamic experience. And they went back to Tennessee, and they, you know probably better than I do, they had the first anti-Sharia laws in America, in the state of Tennessee, which is a very good thing. So yes, you have some, but unfortunately most of them are not too much involved in the issue. But then again, you can change that by electing others.
Our schools are indoctrinating our children with a whitewashed version of history that includes the notion that Islam is the religion of peace. Is that happening in Europe as well? And how do we counter it?
Yes, certainly do. I mean, the media, the educational system, unfortunately, certainly the state-owned media, and in Holland we have all the education is almost all state-owned, and the curricula that they use are the worst ever. And not only when it comes to Islam and the religion of peace, but also when it comes to Israel and all the other things. So, well, if you are bored of a school, you might change it, but also here it goes. We asked so many parliamentary questions, and we ask people, send us examples, send us ridiculous examples, and we do. And every time when we get an example, we get the Minister of Education to Parliament, or we ask written questions, parliamentary questions, and by our constitution they have to answer, and we get a lot of publicity with that, and sometimes things change. But that's the only way to deal with it, to make it transparent, to embarrass them if they make false accusation or say the wrong things about Islam, give them other examples, and you need politicians to do that.
Can you suggest one, maybe two actions that people in this audience could take tomorrow, next week, next year to help turn the tide?
Well, first, I will not say it anymore because I said already 500 times, elect better leaders. It's the main message. Elect, this is the process that you should make. Second, inform your friends, inform your colleagues, inform your family. Don't be afraid. If we are with many more people who show people, who tell people the true nature about Islam, once again, I'm not talking about the people, I'm not talking about the Muslims, but about the ideology of Islam, inform and educate people. This is an enormous important step that we should take. Don't be afraid. If we all do it, we will have tomorrow this whole room multiplied by maybe 10. There's no better way to start the day of tomorrow.
"100 years from now, where do you think European culture will be?"
Well, it depends on which direction we will go. You know, what is of concern is not only the minority that is making our countries like hell, that is committing these atrocities that we see today in the whole of the Western world, and certainly in the Middle East with all those terrorist attacks and the Islamic State and things like that. But the problem is the majority that allows it. Please think about that tonight if you go home. We saw as well in Nazi Germany, we saw in the communist Soviet Union, that also there it was just a minority who committed the crimes. But it was the majority who allowed it to happen. Without the majority who allowed it to happen, it would not have been possible. So make sure how your majority of Muslims in your country think. I told you about the surveys done by leftish institutions like the University of Amsterdam. More left you will not be able to find in Holland. And even their education proves that the majority of the Muslims in Holland believe that Islamic jihadis are heroes. That 80% of the Turkish youth, like I said, believe that violence is not a bad thing towards anybody who is non-Islamic. But also in a positive way, if we know that the majority, that it would not be possible, all those terrible crimes in Nazi Germany, in the Islam, in communist Russia or Soviet Union, it would not have been possible without the majority. It's also that the majority can change it. You are also a majority in your country today. Don't wait until you are a minority. Don't wait. Don't let it happen that the minority will become the majority. I mean, in Europe, it's getting in that direction. In Europe it is. By the year 2070, which looks very far away, Islam will be the biggest religion in the world. It will be bigger than Christianity. In some countries it's even sooner than 2070. So make sure that you stop the immigration from Islamic countries, and 2, Islamic immigrants that are in the United States, if they adhere, not by their, but by your laws, values and constitution, let them stay, and if not, my suggestion will be expel them.
All right, this questioner suggests that the only practical solution to the spread of Islam seems that it's ultimately going to lead to war and the destruction of the Islamic states. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, I mean, you have to be blind not to see that there already is a war going on. We did not, and it's very important, we did not declare war on them. They declared war on us. Every day again. So we don't have to negotiate with them. We should fight them. I mean, this is what I learned. This is what I learned when I lived in Israel. If you negotiate with terrorists, they see it as weakness. It is weakness. You should not negotiate with Hamas or the Taliban or with the Islamic State or whatsoever. You should fight them. You should bomb them. You should get them out of the reality of this world. Let them go to the 72 versions in whatever country they have. That's where they should be.
All right, before we wrap it up, I just want to express our appreciation to the security personnel on site. Thank you all very much. And now, did you want to say something, Jerry? Yeah, so we'll have a book signing over at the red table in the front there. And that's it for the question. So thank you very much.
Thank you, my friends. Thank you. Thank you so much.